Well, in the day we'll continue with chapter 2 for Nerus. Okay, so we did this part last time. So these 3 records have since sold up. So I'm not gonna recap what happened last time, but you can go on the you go look at the previous video if you want to see everything that happened. So these 3 records here do not have Obley featured at all. These are 3 different records here, so maybe this will cover Alicia Biden, maybe, I think. I'm gonna go ahead and start this one first. Initializing playback. Body stuffed his hands into his pockets and settled as he made his way down the road. The night was quiet, not a dog or cat to be heard in the distance. A thin layer of mist had settled on the streets. The policeman alongside him laughed as he saw him adjust his car. He found the chill pleasant, as though he had gone out with his normal clothes. He must have found amusing how dressed up Body was by comparison. The crocodile couldn't wait to get to his destination. Shut up, man. I feel so cold because I'm blessed. You wouldn't look down on a deity's blessing, wouldn't you? Quit to irritate as usual. Yes, please send me all the barking about your blessing. You talk as if you were working at the church instead of a detective. That's a low blow. It's not low if it's true, I say. A fair square blow. The 2 men became distracted by a wagon passing by them. Shortly after they arrived at one of the few buildings around with lights still on. Body sighed with relief at being greeted by the murky warmth inside the locale. The smell of cigars and static ridden music from an old record player immediately assaulted their senses. The crocodile took his scarf and some other clothing articles off and hung them by the entrance before looking for a free table. The police officer sat across from him, twiddling his thumbs. But yes, good job in today's case. We didn't even consider the tenant was related to the crime, let alone check his background. You gotta tell me someday where you get all that information from. I'm not doing anything illegal, and that's what's bothering you. People are very willing to gossip if you are nice and butter them up. I noticed a connection. You're a Detective Smith, that's all. I see. I meant I hadn't figured you to be a people person. Body wouldn't put it that way either. He wasn't particularly eager to socialize, but being affable was, at times, an important mystery-solving skill. One doesn't need violence or intimidation to crack people open. Showing kindness the right way, being understanding or friendly at the right moment. All those could earn you access to other people's hearts. Many want to feel understood and might open up to someone who shows interest. Of course, he wasn't some fiend opening people for the sake of it. But if something smelled wrong, it was his duty to investigate. This had been the case for the last crime he solved, where he managed to establish a connection between the seemingly unrelated victim and the killer by interviewing the other tenants. Still, what unpleasant business it was all. He must prefer his puzzles to not be so melodramatic. Perhaps he should have specialized in investigating cases of thievery instead of murders. I'm curious. Body took a sip of his wine, waiting for the officer to continue. But he waited for the crocodile to respond with a bow. Barbara Octavia from the Church of Non moved south to this little country to work as a private detective. The low woman resonated within Body's throat. Ah, sorry. Do you just like that name? Regardless, it's a good question. Hmm? Why indeed? Body had pondered the same on multiple occasions. Each time the same answer popped up. That one day, when his and Wells' family had gone on a vacation, the two of them ran away into the forest. The canine silhouette as he stood on top of that boulder, the leaves dancing around him. Things had changed since then, but back then Body looked up to them. He wanted to be like him, but when Well told him he wanted to run away from home, the crocodile blindly followed him. Had that been a mistake? It didn't matter. Body had learned to live with his choices and felt accomplished as he was. Much of how he did his detective work he had learned from the canine. Although he used to show little restraint, and Body often had to remind him to not prod people they could establish as being connected to the case. Now, Well wasn't around anymore. They started their detective business together as a duo, but he had retired a few years back after meeting a woman. And then he disappeared, leaving his surviving child and wife behind. Body had first been left to pick the pieces of the business he abandoned, and years later Well called him and hastily explained he needed to go away for some time and to ask him to look after his family. What a joke of a friend he had picked in the end. I should check on Angela tomorrow. It sounds like things have been rough for you. I'm not good with kids, let alone abandoned wives. And Angela, I don't want to kick her while she's down, but something's off with her. She's nothing like what I've heard from Well before we fell out of touch. There's more going on here than meets the eye. Is that your detective intuition talking? You could say that. The police officer put down his fork and closed his eyes as he drank some more wine. There's nothing strange about a mother grieving after being abandoned by her husband's Body. But Well didn't make it sound like that was the case. I had the impression he'd come back. This happened a year ago, more or less, and there are no signs of his return yet. The crocodile sighed and shook his head. The both of them perked up when a loud scratch tore through the air. Some drunk had tried to fiddle with a record player, knocking a needle across the record's surface. Body then looked at the wall and noticed the time. He hurried up to finish his meat and wine. You're going so soon? I told you, didn't I? I have an appointment tonight. Why? What's that about? And I'm not going to tell you just because you asked. He hurried out to finish his meat and wine. You're going so soon? I told you, didn't I? I have an appointment tonight. Why? What's that about? Hey, I'm not going to tell you everything just because you asked. This was nobody else's business. The life of a detective had come with more baggage than his starry-eyed younger self had estimated. He needed a place where he could forget all about work, stop being himself, and relax. Drinking didn't scratch that itch, much less did these stuffy, noisy taverns. Police officers loved frequenting these places, so they reminded him too much of work. No, he needed to separate from Body Spiner, the detective. A place where, even if recognized, he'd be treated differently. A place with like-minded individuals. I'll see you later. Have a good one. After renting a room, Body headed directly to a familiar locker room. Each piece of clothing he freed himself form was a way off his shoulders, which he then tossed into the creaky wooden locker. Once free of the constraints of the fabric, he proceeded to grab the one large-sized towel available and tied it around his waist and above his tail. It was white and rough to the touch, dry. It might even have been uncomfortable if not for the equally rough scales protecting him. His butt was mostly exposed, but he didn't care. He didn't have anything to hide while in here. By his side, telling himself to forget everything. It wasn't true one left their old self at the door when entering the bathhouse, but at the very least everything outside ceased to matter as much. What sort of man would he choose? How would he be of service to him, to give him a night to remember? Would he try to hook up with one of the other regulars, or would be on the lookout for newcomers? Perhaps he would even entertain many of them that night. That thought produced a faint tickling within his stomach. A cloud of steam welcomed the crocodile into the room. He detected around 4 other men amidst the fog before walking further in and taking a seat. He lay back on the wet mosaic wall, allowing the heat to melt away the stress from his job. His fingers traced a path through his leg up to his belly, running into 1 or 2 scars along the way. Which was this one from? Right, that must have been from the time he had apprehended Mr. Anders. He was inexperienced back then, so he had been unable to prevent the criminal from stabbing him in the thigh. He had been very fortunate the damage wasn't fatal. In this one, what was it again? A bite mark from a hunting dog, a gunshot here, a scar there. It all became blurry like the steam filling the room, and melted away, and so did Body Spiner, the detective who melted away to reveal the nameless, blessed man underneath. The man took notice of the peeking eyes surrounding him. Did the fact that Crocodile was a blessed human provide these men with some thrill they couldn't find anywhere else? Was that why they kept coming back? Did they enjoy sullying what once was considered a sign of divine favor to defile it for their pleasure? The crocodile raised a hand and made a gesture for anyone to get closer. The first man that approached him felt familiar, but he wasn't sure they knew each other. Faces blurred together in there. He did immediately recognize his voice, however. It's been a while since I last saw you. I started to miss you. The town has been needing my services very often lately. It barely leaves me with some time for myself. Don't forget, we also need you, you big lug. Well, I wouldn't care. The man drew closer, sneaking one hand under the crocodile's towel. A moan rumbled out of his throat as the man got white to the point and started playing with his slit. The crocodile signaled another of the onlookers who wasn't even trying to hide his election to join him. The men ran their hands through his body with little care, kissed his belly, shoulders, and neck. The crocodile soon stood up and guided the 2 men to his room. He lay on his back and over his legs, granted the 2 men access. One of them didn't waste any time before mounting him and thrust it into his slit. The crocodile closed his eyes and endured it. He really had missed him. It was no wonder the crocodile hadn't come here in 2 months. As soon as that thought popped up, he invited the second man to get closer. He needed a distraction. His mouth was unfit for blowjobs, but the scaly man was skilled enough with his fingers to entertain his second kiss until it was his turn to wreck his backside. He kept him just on the edge, occasionally licking off the stuff from his head. When he noticed the man fucking his slit was drawing closer to his climax, he gently nudged him away with his legs and offered him to change places with the other man. He was planning to have them come inside of him Of course, but it was too soon still. He kept them both occupied and on edge all night. He he might have been just a bathhouse whore, but he still got to decide the rules of the game. But even then, the crocodile felt a pain of discomfort in the back of his mind. He had been paying attention to these men. He knew one very well, the other seemed harmless enough. But surely he was being overly cautious. It had been so long since his last visit here. Surely they weren't still waiting for him. The young man stopped his jerking motion and looked at the crocodile somewhat strangely. "You feeling well?" Yes, I'm sorry." My mind drifted away for a moment. It made no sense to think about it. There was something for Body to be concerned about, and he had judged that by now it should be safe to spend the night here. So he smiled and invited them to switch again. That night, 2 months ago, someone had found out about his night's adventures. Someone knew that this was when he was at his most vulnerable, so naturally this was when he decided to attack. Body still didn't know what had happened as his assailant managed to escape, and he couldn't even recall his face. Just who was that? It was unlikely for him to have been the relative or friend of someone he helped escape, he helped capture. He found it hard to believe they'd follow him here. The other possibility wasn't any better. Had he overstepped and angered the wrong people, so they sent an assassin after him? The police were of that opinion. The crocodile got jerked back into reality by thunderous thrusts and a man's moans. Damn it, had he got distracted? Do you want to stay for a while longer? No, thank you. I should have headed home a while ago. I see. This night wasn't going as the crocodile hoped, but it wasn't over yet. The young man that remained had some cause to adjourn at a threesome, but was less assertive than the other lover. And besides, the scaly had grown tired of lying on his back. The crocodile caressed his face and hair, enjoying that expression of pleasure. This tenderness wasn't too bad either. He knew nothing of this young man under him, but enjoyed the intimacy, that, and enjoying just a close look at his face as he squeezed the. There weren't any words after that. The crocodile lay down, wrapping the other man in his arms. He didn't protest or try to get up, so taking that as acceptance, he brought him a bit closer. Around now, he would be getting up to see if he could get some more fun before wrapping up the night. But the idea didn't seem appealing at all. Was it just that he was apprehensive about the incident 2 months ago? Or maybe he had started craving this sort of intimacy. Either way, up until a few months ago, this wasn't fun. His job wasn't fun anymore. His escapades to the bathhouse weren't fun anymore either. He was alone, stuck in unfulfilling work relationships with the police, always on the lookout for people who to break open or ignore for the investigation. Perhaps he had been focusing on his job too much and neglected other aspects of his life. But solving crimes just wasn't funny anymore, not without Will. And even if he were to come back one day and join him again, all those recent events had soured the image of his canine friend. He wanted to keep holding on to this man in his arms, but he knew he was a stranger with his life to go back to. A life he wasn't a part of. He wasn't a part of anyone's life. And so Body concluded that night it was time to bring some changes to his life. First of all, he needed a career change. He wasn't sure of what yet, but he had time to figure it out. His job at the time paid well, and his expenses were low enough he'd be able to survive on his savings for a while if needed. And maybe he'd finally be in a place to look for actual friendships once that's done. But if that were the case, he needed to start heading home soon. He was supposed to check on Angela tomorrow. Bondy was always amazed when visiting these suburbs, knowing his old friend had spent some years living here. It didn't fit him, in his opinion. Werewolf enjoyed living on the streets of some red light district more than settling down in such a secluded location. But come to think of it, he and his wife did spend a great deal of time traveling before his disappearance. But that was for job reasons. Angela never told him what they were doing, probably because her wounds were still too fresh. It seemed their oldest son was about to join them in their business too, just before he died in an accident and Well disappeared soon after. That damn dog. I never thought I'd feel bad for his wife. Angela's family home was just as big and extravagant and peerless as the other houses in the area. It looked more like a small mansion, I bet, still too large for just 4 people to live in it, let alone just 2. Body knocked on the door and waited, both hands shoved deep into his pockets. He waited for several seconds, but there was no response. Were they out? He knocked again, harder. This time, there was a faint sound coming from somewhere inside the house. Someone coming down the stairs, perhaps. But how strange, he never heard that from outside before. Despite that, there was still no answer. But convinced somebody was home, Body reached to knock a third time. Only then did the door open. A small golden chain rattled before being stretched straight. Thin fingers, so white one would think them translucent, were resting on the door's edge. A cigarette eye peeked from the crack to greet Body. The crocodile nodded at the figure. "Hello, Angela." After an instant, the door slowly closed, and there was some noise from the chain being undone before it opened again in its entirety, revealing the figure of a ghastly woman. Her skin and hair were equally pale, contrasted with her deep red eyes. Her fingers, shoulders, and cheeks were thin, as if she hadn't been eating properly for weeks. If only that was a problem. "How are you feeling today?" What a pointless question. She looked worse than the last time he'd been there, and that was less than a week ago. Perhaps it would be wise to start checking up on her even more frequently. Get down here. Sorry, shit. Concentrate on weed. Thin fingers, so white one would think them translucent, were resting on the door's edge. A cigarette eye peeked from the crack to greet Body. The crocodile nodded at the figure. "Hello, Angela." After an instant, the door slowly closed, and there was some noise from the chain being undone before it opened again in its entirety, revealing the figure of a ghastly woman. Her skin and hair were equally pale, contrasted with her deep red eyes. Her fingers, shoulders, and cheeks were thin, as if she hadn't been eating properly for weeks. If only that was a problem. "How are you feeling today?" What a pointless question. She looked worse than the last time he'd been there, and that was less than a week ago. Perhaps it would be wise to start checking up on her even more frequently, he thought, but he feared that would only add to her stress. The way her chest rose and deflated, how fidgety she was with her necklace. Had something happened? Where was Elisa? What about Lisa? Oh, could she be at school? No, she's in her room. The woman's eyes danced with hesitation for a brief moment. Then she sighed with resignation and locked eyes with the crocodile. "Body, can you come in?" The crocodile raised an eyebrow, but nodded and stepped into the house once he made way for him. They entered a tidy and spacious dining room. The dust had started to settle on the furniture and the family paintings hanging from the wall. How well of you to invite me inside before I even butter you up. No answer. Angela looked down, clasping her hand together, her eyes contemplative. Is something wrong? I'm not sure you will believe me, is all, Buddy. But I think someone broke into the house yesterday. The crocodile let an interested guess out. He wouldn't have guessed from the state of the house. It didn't look like it had been ransacked overnight or anything of the sort. Why? Last night someone... She took a deep breath. Someone was staring at me while I was lying down in the bed. I thought it was Elise at first, but he was too tall. And he had these big yellow eyes. She started shaking all over before her body stepped closer and put a hand on her shoulder. He put on a pacing, soft voice. It's all right, Elisa. Listen, do you check your doors and windows? Yes, but I didn't find anything. What about Elisa? She was fast asleep. She didn't hear or see anything. Buddy closed his eyes. I figured you were dreaming. Scared as they might be, hallucinations like that can happen to anyone while they're asleep. But I'm guessing you'd like me to check upstairs just in case, right? Angela's jaw went limp from her surprise for an instant, but she quickly gathered what wits she had left and nodded. Do you want to come? Oh no, I'm too scared to go there right now. Well, I'll promise you it'll be fine. I'll be back soon. After a reassuring tap on the shoulder and asking for directions to her room, Buddy went upstairs. Buddy furrowed his eyebrows upon entering the bedroom. The king-size bed didn't look like it had been tended in a long time. The closet was open and some folded pieces of clothing were laid on the floor. Had Angela been looking for something in there? She had mentioned someone had been staring at her, but neglected to give details. Perhaps she thought someone was standing in front of this closet the night prior. And this is the women's clothing. There were multiple articles intended for a rather tall man. They hadn't been used in a long time. Buddy ignored this and checked the closet, which was almost empty after Angela went through it. But even his trained eye was unable to discern anything out of the ordinary. Next, he crouched beside the bed and looked around. There wasn't anything there. Angela was confused for a person or even a pair of eyes. This makes no sense. I don't want to disregard what she says on principle, but she has been getting worse. What the hell am I supposed to do about this? Well, I'm a detective, not a doctor. And if I was, Angela would refuse to see me anyway. Buddy exited the bedroom. Before he could make his way downstairs, however, another door softly opened. It caught his eye, and behind it was a small figure. A child with long blonde hair and amber eyes, much like her father's. The crocodile smiled and nodded at her, but before he could walk away, the kid talked to him. Are you with the police? No, kid. I'm a private detective. I'm a friend of your mother. But it's the first time we meet, isn't it? It was then that the kid's words fully sank in. Why does he think he was with the police? At a glance at the stairs, Buddy stepped closer to the child and squatted to meet her eye to eye. She seemed surprisingly calm around him. Why did you think I was with the police? Lisa looked down and stepped out from behind the door. She stood like a penguin, both orange tints were glued to her sides, and looked at the crocodile. This up close, the crocodile noticed a small detail, small but still noticeable bruises on the kid's arms. A police officer visited the other day, but Mommy told me to go upstairs. I see. Your mommy asked me to help her with something. Say, have you noticed anything strange around the house? The kid looked to the side and tilted her head. She wanted to say something, but she didn't find the words for it. Instead, she started walking toward one door near the end of the stairs. The crocodile followed her in once she stopped and attempted to open it. It was locked. Where is this place? Grandpa's room. Grandpa. It's the first time I hear of such a thing. Is your grandfather living with you now? No, he went away with Daddy and David. And why are you showing it to me? Alicia looked down and put her hands behind her back as she twisted her body to the other side. I don't know. Sally was bothering this kid, rather because of a lack of vocabulary or comprehension. She was unable to communicate what. Talking to her would be fruitless, and Buddy was now worried that Angela would come to check on him and find them talking, so she sent her back to her room. But he stopped her to ask one last question. Have you gone to school as of late? Mommy says I have to stay inside. I see. This is much worse than I had suspected. What did I do? So I talked to Angela about this. The school must have already noticed Elisa stopped attending her class and sent someone to check on her. But you would expect a teacher to do that. So why were the police here? The atmosphere at the bar was lacking that day, with the record playing being out of service. Some drunkard must have gotten annoyed at it, kicked it, and broke a component inside. Buddy checked the time with absent eyes, and he played with his almost empty glass by moving in circles. At one point he felt compelled to drink what remained. He regretted it soon after. Eventually, the sound of the doorbell announced the arrival of a new guest, Buddy's cop buddy. He sat across from him with a whiny grunt, and the crocodile put the glass down. Well, I have to say, I was surprised to receive a letter from you of all people, Buddy. I can't blame you. Were you able to look into what I requested? The man's cheeks filled with air as he clutched his hands on the table. Yes, I can't tell you everything I found out. You surely understand, but I can answer a question or two. Buddy closed his eyes and nodded. Very well. Why did the police visit Angela? The policeman sighed. Some days ago, a teacher from her daughter's school checked up on them because the girl stopped attending classes and there was no word from her or her family. Things were fine until Angela became very violent and attacked the woman. That's when we were called to the scene. Incidentally, we've been receiving reports of erratic behavior from Angela as of late. My fellow policemen were tasked with reporting on the current situation in the house. Are they planning to intervene? It's possible. What do you think of the woman, Buddy? Do you think she's well? I can't say I know her well. We only met after her husband went missing. But even then I think some of her behavior is irregular, yes. There you have it. I guess some people higher up are trying to gauge if she and her child are safe in their current living situation. If she continues like this, I'm afraid they might take the kid away. The man took a toothpick and put it in his mouth, much like one would do a cigar. Meanwhile, Buddy stared at the table, his claws hitting the wooden surface with him. A dry stare within Buddy. Although he felt no obligation toward his old friend anymore, he had taken it upon himself to make sure his family would be safe. Knowing the situation had deteriorated to this extent under his nose hurt. He was supposed to be good at seeing through people enforcing their secrets into the open. How could he turn his eyes away from Angela's situation the way he did? Damn you, Ral. I was never supposed to deal with crap like this. Think, Buddy spotted. What are you going to do now? What is the connection between you and his family, Buddy? I don't think they are connected to you. I don't think they are connected to one of your investigations. Am I right? Yes, you are. Buddy raised his eyes to him, shaken. The policeman raised an eyebrow. I figured, so I was mighty curious about why you want info on them. And well, the missing husband detail sticks out like a sore thumb, you know. I believe it's wasteful to ask questions you know the answer to then. I can only assume you know who the husband is and about his connection with me. It wasn't too hard to figure out. His name sounded familiar, then I remembered the newspapers from back when your name first popped up. Does the police know anything about, well, where he is now? I mean, the man shook his head. He disappeared without a trace. Then what will happen to the kid if she's taken away from her mother? Will she end up at some orphanage? If she is taken away, and what happens after is not up to us to decide, I'm afraid. Personally, I don't think it's good for a child to be torn away from their mother, from their home no matter what. Of course, if you care so much, you could apply to become her caretaker. Excuse me? You would just like the idea? It looks like you care about this family a great deal, so it would make sense to me if you did this. Body hadn't considered the idea. Considering how often he found himself away from home due to his work, he wasn't certain he could perform the role of a parent. Moreover, raising a child is expensive. He would burn through his savings much faster than if he was living alone. If he took Elisa in, a career change would be out of the question. He needed a job that would pay well enough for the good of them, after all. So the suggestion filled him with apprehension. I'm sorry about this, Buddy, but that's how it is. But I can keep you posted. Yes, I appreciate it. See you later then. Make sure you check your correspondence often. After they parted ways, Buddy didn't take his usual way home. He didn't make his way to the bathhouse either. His legs were taking him somewhere deep and dark, while he was distracted thinking about his conundrum. The streets were chilly and silent. The moon's blue glow overpowered even the oil lamps lighting the streets. Suddenly, Buddy looked up from the ground and realized what part of town was this. Perhaps because of the moonlight, he didn't recognize it. It wasn't that late, but the houses didn't show any sign of activity inside them. Not a noise, not a light inside. No one sitting outside to enjoy the breeze or peeking through the windows. The wind was becoming frigid, and that made it all the more striking when a yellow light appeared across the street, breaking through the moonlight. Buddy squinted at the building. It was a chapel, accompanied by a humble park with some wooden swings, a seesaw, and a slide. The crocodile sampling came to a stop as he squinted to the building. This is stupid. If I walked in there and offered to seven some prayers, how would that help me? Gods rarely concern themselves with such fleeting issues. People die every day. Families are devastated and destroyed so often, and from within who? They won't help me, but that's all right. The contradictory emotions and body wrapped around each other, twisted themselves into a single thread. Although he once stood in his friend's saddle, he was his own man now. He had continued his business out of his desire for mystery and adventure, despite what baggage it might come with. But in the process, he had learned to observe a side of his friend that left a bitter taste in his mouth. Buddy didn't like Rao anymore. If they met now, he would annoy him. And yet, there was a sense of gratefulness that conflicted with this. He owed well, if a little. Without him, he would still be in that stuffy church working with his wicked family. He was unhappy he had failed to repay his debt by looking after Angela. So if something did happen to Angela, Buddy would at least take care of the daughter. Maybe it would delay his plans of changing careers, but he figured if he still had some gratitude toward Well, then his life wasn't too bad after all. Besides, wasn't he ultimately looking to connect with someone? Adopting a child hadn't even crossed his mind till now. Maybe it was his own story that made it hard for the crocodile to entertain the idea he could act as a guardian, let alone a parent. But that was a bond nevertheless, one that lasted forever, that carves itself deeper and deeper like a needle piercing one's skin. For even if they are gone, the gaping wound and the scars left behind stay with us, never to heal completely. Finalizing playback. So we just play this record here, and we got to learn about Buddy and his past and how he got to know Alicia. So, Well was Alicia's father, and he and Buddy were partners, detective partners. And then his friend left and abandoned the family, went somewhere. So it was just Buddy by himself. So apparently Buddy doesn't really like him that much anymore, but I think he kind of feels like he owes Well some gratitude for his career, so I guess decided to become Elisa's adoptive father, because the mother clearly was not in there mentally. I mean, she was, when the police came to check up on her, when the teacher for Elisa's school came to check up on her, because Elisa hasn't been attending her classes and the mother attacked her, so they sent the police there to see what was going on. So that was a nice little record, a little history and how Buddy and Elisa came together and all that. So there's two other records here in the same time period, so I'm gonna play this one next. Initializing playback. Dear Diary, today I went fishing with my mommy and daddy and David. Daddy made us put all the fish we caught in a bucket full of water. David and I had a competition and I won, but Daddy made us throw the fish back into the river after. I wanted to eat them. Dear Diary, today David took me to the church. I don't like going there. The monks are always asking them for favors. I want him to play only with me. It says when he's a bit older he'll be very busy, so I want to play with him all the time until then. At least he always buys me a snack after. He knows why I like better than Mommy and Daddy. They always get me sweets, but David knows I like those salty biscuits better. Dear Dolly, today I sneaked into Grandpa's room again. If you're reading this, please don't snitch. He's gonna be out of town because of work for some weeks, so I get his book collection all for myself, as long as my parents don't find out. Today I started reading a book about stories from the old world. It was exciting, but I didn't get far because Daddy returned home earlier. Dear Diary, today Grandpa returned home. I couldn't finish the book in time. David noticed I was down, so he took me to play in the park. I enjoyed myself because David was with me. I wish he didn't have to leave when he grows up. Dear Diary, last night I had to get up and go to the bathroom because I drank too much water before bed. On the way there, I heard voices coming from Grandpa's room. It was my grandpa and someone I didn't recognize. But when I looked through the keyhole, I saw a strange man. He was dressed in all black, and he didn't have a face. The stripes of white and blue. It must have been a nightmare. The way he talked scared me so much I don't remember what they were saying. Dear Diary, last night I had another dream, a nicer one. I think in it I met the goddess they always mention at the church because I heard her voice. I was stuck in my bed. I couldn't move. I was scared at first, but then I heard her. Her voice was calm and nice. It reminded me of Mommy's. She asked me my name, and I told her. Then she said she would make one, and only one wish of mine come true. I thought about it for a bit, but the answer was obvious that David would always be there when I needed him. There are no further entries past this point. However, the diary has many blank pages left. Its owner simply stopped writing on it after this one. Finalizing playback. Next up was Elisa's diary. Got to learn a bit more about Elisa from her point of view in that diary. She really did love her brother, and she loved spending time with him. And she also liked her grandpa. So, got to learn more about Elisa herself from that diary. So we're going to play this record now. And this allows some playback. A little boy got up from the floor and looked out the window. The sound of hooves and wheels on the road had piqued his curiosity. Carriages never arrived this late to the town unless they contained travelers new to the area, most likely looking for a shelter for the night. The kid watched intently as it passed by the orphanage. Interesting, it wasn't a beat up old thing like always. It was large, with a ceiling, a door, and windows like a small moving house. The wood looked impeccable as well, like the carriages he'd see in picture books. As the carriage disappeared, the boy heard a knock on the door, which then opened without further warning. Miss Maria entered the dormitory, followed by the boy's roommates. Edmund had his favorite ball under his arm. I still guess you'd be back in your room by now, Alois. Oh, you studying? No, I was just reading a story. The woman nodded, having recognized the thick book next to Alois. I see. Well, let's get you ready for bed. First, let's offer the 7-hour prayers. No one had ever told Alois this. It was something he had figured out by himself. But he wasn't like the other kids. He was good at listening to the adults, doing chores, studying, participating in game outdoors. Not much was to be expected. Without a family, one day they would need to fend for themselves all alone. This orphanage was located in a humble region, but it was operated with the intent of raising exceptional boys and girls who would work for the several churches in the future, and as such they received funding from the churches themselves. Even the town it was located in had been developed to house the orphanage's workers as well as provided with food, repairs, and services. The kids were unaware of this, of course. All they were told was that they needed to study hard to earn a comfortable future. If they failed, they would end up like the farmers that they sometimes saw working all day under the sun. But not everyone could perform well. Some kids didn't care for the adults' warnings or struggle with the subjects they were taught. Maybe they missed their families or the pressure was too big for them. Even the ones performing well required themselves to sleep every once in a while. As for Alois, he found all of this very strange. He never felt such pressure or fear, but he wasn't excited about his prospects either. He often thought back to one of his first classes at the orphanage. A loud slap had resonated through the room, soon to be followed by a high-pitched scream. Another kid had been using a classmate as target practice with his make-do straw blowgun. The teacher had been in a foul mood since early that morning, and that mischief set him off. He shouted at and hit the boy, who screamed in confusion and pain only to receive further abuse and retaliation. Everyone witnessed the scene with wide eyes and tense shoulders until the teacher finally decided to drag the kid to the corner of the room and told him to stay there for what remained of the class. It was back then that Alois first thought that there was something wrong with him. One of his roommates approached him after and told him, "Oh, Alois, I wish I was brave like you." He didn't even flinch when Mr. Charles got mad. He really hadn't. The fear the boy had observed in his classmates' eyes and posture was completely absent in his heart. Alois thought he really must have been brave, but soon he realized otherwise. Alois never felt afraid. He didn't feel anxious about his future, but he didn't feel determined or even interested in it. All he did was follow the adults' orders, since someone had instilled in him that good boys listened to what adults said. He wanted to be a good boy, but this didn't mean his life was completely devoid of emotion. As part of his education, Alois was mandated to read books selected from him. 2 years ago, one title had caught his attention, but now he didn't remember the title, and he didn't think it was a good book either. But the premise had captivated him: a teenage girl unraveling the mysteries around a monster rumored to inhabit a swamp near her village. It was an interesting read, but the ending had disappointed him. There was never a monster, but rather a man who had become lost in the swamp at an early age and had grown up as a savage. But ever since, Alois had become interested in books with similar subjects. Unfortunately, he had to make do with the orphanage's library, which wasn't very large. And so his favorite book ended up being a compilation of old myths from the old world. It was exciting to read about the many creatures believed to inhabit the old world's ancient times. Giants, griffins, hydras, gorgons, minotaurs. And he was also saddened by how often they met violent ends. The world was an unkind place to monsters, he thought. "Alois, can you help me with my homework before class today? I don't understand this problem. I didn't do my homework yet either. Let's do it together after breakfast." "All right." That morning, at the dining hall, Maria made an announcement. "Today, gentlemen, from Knox Church will visit us, so be on your best behavior. They will watch our classes and will be staying here until this afternoon." Having another adult sitting on the side during the entirety of the class was a bit strange for the kids, but on the flip side, the teachers were a bit nicer and helpful in their presence. The man in Alois's classroom, a gentleman with round eyes and very little hair left on the sides and back of his head, seemed disinterested, although he took note of everything he saw. Later that day, Alois was about to go play with the other kids when Maria called him. A man from the church was accompanying her. "How can I help, ma'am?" "This gentleman said he'd like to meet you, Alois. Let me introduce you. This is Alvaro, abbot of Knox Church." The crocodile offered the boy a handshake, which he accepted after an instant. "That sounded tight, man. That's fine. Here, will you mind looking at this?" The abbot pulled a ring from his finger and held it in front of Alois. The boy blinked, staring into the gemstone on top of it. It was pitch black the way a deep hole in the ground is. He felt pulled in, but he didn't avert his eyes. It startled him a little when the crocodile closed his hand and moved it behind his back. "How interesting. All your teachers tell me you are quite a remarkable little boy. Say, are you interested in the outside world? And traveling, maybe?" Alois shook his head. "Excellent. I heard you like books." Do you know our church has the biggest library in the world? That made the boy perk up. Unfortunately, it's only accessible to non-monks. What do you say? You become one of my monks if you could access it? Do you have stories with monsters? Alvaro raised an eyebrow at that question. Maria quickly interjected. He loves old world myths. Those are his favorite books. I see. Why, yes, we have a lot of those. Our collection of old world tales alone dwells in a library you can hope to find in a backward town like this. Maria barely held back glaring at Alvaro, but Alois hadn't even registered that. Was it true that they had so many monster stories they wouldn't even fit in the orphanage's library? As Soto walking motion betrayed his interest. Well, ask a question. Oh, yes, I like that. The crocodile snapped his fingers. Perfect. Get to packing your things, kid. We're departing in an hour. And say goodbye to your friends. Finalizing playback. So, for how much longer will you toil here? Are you ready to give up? We don't need the outside world, you know. We don't need to play pretend to fit in and much less to strive for times long past. Here we can have anything we want. Some will tell you it's an illusion, but so what? Everyone lives in their little head. They just try to pass their world off as the truth because they are too big of cowards to admit how empty all this nonsense is. Look at the witch. Let me tell you about her. I know what awaits her in the future. Hers is a loveless world where people are measured by their usefulness. She's no hypocrite. She holds herself to that same standard. Knowing she's a burden, how wicked feeble she is. It eats up her heart, and yet the detective has nothing but love towards her. She's willing to put up with any inconvenience and sacrifice to make sure she's alright. But because she sees people in such a simplistic way, she's unable to open up and accept that affection. Although love isn't all it takes to save a person, if she could accept it, then perhaps things will end up differently for her. Well, it's interesting to me how that perspective of hers blinds her. And talk about love, I wonder if that monster boy even feels that at all. No, that might be a bit cruel of me. Monsters don't necessarily lack a capacity for love, but maybe they process it differently to other beings. Anyway, the point is that there is no statement surrendering to delusion. It can make all that you see into the truth. I'll be here, waiting eagerly for you to accept my offer. I'm no liar. So these 3 new records popped up here. So these will continue the 3 stories. So this here was his body story from his past. This record will continue that part. Will continue that story. Well, I guess he said like 3 stories really, but anyway. I'm just gonna say there are 3 stories. Just make it simple, but this story here up here will continue this story with Body, meaning Elisa. And this diary here, Elisa's diary, there will be more to her diary next time. And this story here that we just saw with Alois and how he became a knock monk, there'll be more for him up here next time. So about Alois, if you watch chapter 1, you know he's kind of always been fascinated in books and mythical stuff, you know, like monsters and reptiles and stuff like that. And He likes being a werewolf. He likes the look. He likes the look of a werewolf. Because he likes being mythical creatures, or well, wolves are not mythical creatures at will, but I guess he likes like different creatures, like mythical or real, like this big, mighty creatures, with capabilities, like these supernatural capabilities or these natural capabilities, these incredible natural abilities. I guess that's what got Aloy's hooked to books. So he's very smart. I mean, he's like that crime mystery, how he managed to make it kind of difficult for Barty and Lisa to figure out that was him. So he always seemed to be very smart, and it proves in that little story where the kids asked him for help with homework, and that while the other kids just obeyed the teachers and those in authority, he always obeyed them. So this green line will continue Barty's story. This red line will continue the diaries for Lisa, and this blue line will continue Aloy's story. And then I believe once we get here, all the stories I guess will blend here, I guess, or maybe something completely different will happen. Again, this is like a white line, so I guess something different will happen. And then perhaps this will continue with Aloy's, and something entirely new will be here. You think? What was going to happen here eventually? It'll probably be a while, because the creator, I forgot his name, is it Wadio or Wado? Well, the creator is working on a different VN called Devil's Gambit, which is a game that I also play on here. Y'all see here. So it might be a year or two before he gets back to this, because the last update for this came out in May of 2023. It's been over a year now, so it might be a long time until he comes back to this. I'm looking forward to it, what he does. Want to see how this story unravels, and how all these different stories, all these different people connect together. Okay, so thank you all very much for watching. Goodbye.